Hi, what's going on guys? It's Almond. Welcome back to another Wizard101 video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about something I feel like nobody is talking about right now, and I feel like it should be talked about. And that's the gold key change to a lot of the gold key bosses that we currently have. And honestly, I think it's a really good change. It's something that needed to happen, and I'm glad that they're finally doing this because it kind of bothered a lot of players, including myself, that they didn't change these bosses to at least a stone key because of the factor of they don't drop spell elements. I feel like if you're gonna make gold key bosses a thing now, at least leave them as spell element bosses, and all those previous gold key bosses that we had, like, move them down to stone key bosses. There was like something that they had to do, and I'm glad that this update with the whole Novus update and everything like that, they finally made that change, and it's gonna help out a lot of players, to be honest. So what I mean by the gold key changes and the stone key stuff, the bosses that we currently have, like Aphrodite and Darkmoor, Fellspawn in the sewers, which a lot of people farm for Dragoon, the Ether Elemental, which is, I believe, in Imperia, but people mainly farmed it for Stitch Gear. But to be honest, I think if you're gonna farm Stitch Gear and you're willing to waste a gold key, I think it's better to farm the key boss that is in Crab Alley, because I think it's called like Spirit of Ignorance, but it drops spell elements, but on top of that it drops the Stitch Gear pretty often from what I've heard. I don't personally farm that boss. I've done that boss before, but from all the people that I've heard tell me about it, that it drops the spell elements and the Stitch Gears pretty often from there. So I think not many people even farmed Ether Elemental other than the mount maybe, but that's a big maybe, right? Then there's also the bunny boss, or like the bunny like Halloween theme boss that they usually bring back for Halloween, but it's actual key boss in Darkmoor. I think it's like in the second dungeon, and I'm gonna be honest, nobody farms that, and I don't think there is even a reason to do that boss. I try to look at the drop table and I really just don't understand why people even farmed it. I'd say just do it once for the badge and call it quits. There's also Tennyson, which I feel like it's a big thing. Tenny and Afro are like big things in my mind, because Tennyson, a lot of people did use the robe. But when it comes to Novus coming out and nullity robes, void robes, all that type of stuff, Tenny robe's kind of like a little bit shafted. It's still usable in certain builds, but I don't think I would prioritize it. Because personally for me, I don't think I'm gonna be using Tenny Robe anytime soon. Of course, if you're like a new player and you know, maybe you want to have like min-max gear at like a certain level, sure, by all means farm Tenny. I guess it's still useful for that regard, but when it comes to like max level PvE combat, you're not going to be using the Tenny Robe as often as people think, because Nullity Robe is just better for its damage. I mean, there's so many pros to it, of course. So I'm glad Tenny was reduced to a stone key as well, and there's also some Stitch Gear drop from Tennyson as well. Another key boss was the Mimic and Mirage. There was one point in Wiz where crit rings were introduced, and a lot of people were like on that train of like having a lot of crit, but this is like, of course, way back in the day, you know. Now, I mean, when I mean way back in the day, I don't mean like Chrysalis era, but to a certain extent when Mirage was out. So that is now a stone key, but personally I don't think I would waste keys on there. The only thing that's notable in that drop table is the ring and then the pet, but if you really want the pet, you can just hatch with somebody so to save your gold keys. So personally, don't do that boss. If you guys want to, you guys are more than welcome. Maybe get the badge, of course, if you're like a badge collector. These are kind of like saving your gold keys essentially, because they're now turned into stone. And then the last boss that was notably changed was Omen. Omen to me is still kind of a big thing, just like it falls in the category of Afro and Tennyson. Reason being is Omen drops masteries, and some people do still use those masteries because of raids, stuff like that, and just to collect masteries. Especially with the whole arch mastery thing that was introduced, masteries are kind of useless, but when it comes to raids, since I believe raids are using PvP stats, you're still gonna rock a mastery for a support. So definitely I think it's still usable / farmable if you're gonna farm Omen, just for that fact, right? And then of course he drops Dex, which a lot of people did use at a certain point. But to be honest, if we're comparing Dex, when it comes to the Omen deck, I don't ever use the Omen deck. Me personally, I prefer like the new ones that they introduced, like Paradox, of course, back then. You can also even use Executive deck. That was at one point usable. Of course, we have the Nullity and Void cards now, so Definitely those are gonna have upgrades. Don't know when, so we're still waiting on that in test realm. And there's like more options in my opinion than using the Omen decks. So I kind of feel like those are outdated for that regard. So Omen also drops mounts, so I know a lot of people did want those, and they're kind of like excited that you can farm mounts now from Omen without having to waste gold keys. So definitely if you want skates, I believe, and I think there's some other mounts that Omen drops. I haven't looked at the drop table recently, but I'm just kind of going off my mind of the last time I did Omen, which is quite a while ago. So I think out of all the gold key changes that were turned into stone, to me the biggest ones are Aphrodite and Darkmoor, which is like where Masteries is, that third dungeon. You can literally just, you don't even have to do the first fight, you can just go to the left and you can do Aphrodite. Felspon is kind of up there, but I feel like Dragoon Gear is slowly just getting like overshadowed. Dragoon Gear does have its pros. For example, if we look at the boots, which I currently have on my life, I just quickly switch characters. It gives a potent and a sharpen, and I feel like for that regard, it's useful on support characters, so balance, life, even death in my opinion. So I think if you're those characters, I still think you should still use Dragoon boots. The other thing is the amulets. The amulets are good in their own rights as well. If we quickly go back to my storm, because I tend to use it on my storm and my fire, but I guess we'll use our fire for example, right? When it comes to my fire, I do use a Dragoon amulet quite often, and that's because if it's an AoE, it has the fast animation like the dragon, so it's really good, and it's basically a pre-enchanted 4-pip, so I think for that regard it's really nice. So for certain schools, definitely I think the amulets are still worth grabbing. The boots, don't know if you should go for the full set. Me personally, I wouldn't. Of course, if you're just a collector and that's something that you want to do, of course, you know, that's up your alley. But I feel like Felspawn's rates are kind of bad, so I wouldn't even prioritize wasting stone keys on that. But there is some pros and cons, of course. The other boss, of course, Tenny and Omen, like I said, masteries, mounts that a lot of people used to farm. I guess you can still use the decks, of course, but I don't think I would prioritize it me personally. But if that's something that's up your alley, definitely go farm the decks, go farm the mounts and the masteries. But I get my masteries from Imperia if I really need a mastery. But for my stitching, I usually just use Exalted Life Masteries that I farm from the Squid Boss in Atlantia, because I get those quite often, as you can clearly see by all the Exalteds I have, that I've just been, this is just from like a couple runs. So in my opinion, if you just really want in a mastery, you can go and just do the Squid Boss. But the Omen ones give you a blade, I believe, so I guess that's like the different, right? If you just want stats, I would personally just rock this, and it's like level 90 plus. So there's different builds you can do with the masteries, but I feel like the masteries are mainly orientated towards raids, high level PvE content. I wouldn't use it in casual play because of the whole arch mastery thing that they introduced, because in PvE it's almost like 100% guarantee at 160 that you're going to be getting a school pip. So if you're a person that's a balance and you're using Pigsy, you can definitely just set your arch mastery to life and you'll be getting life pips to be able to use Pigsy. So instead of using a life mastery in that slot for your amulet, maybe you can use something else. Maybe you can use a resist amulet, something along those lines, because now it's kind of frees up a slot, which is kind of good in my opinion, because it adds more variety in the game. So I'm kind of glad that they introduced something like that. Obviously for PvP, it's a whole different scenario, and it's just completely different topic. Also, for Aphrodite, I think it's a really big change. Because of the factor is you can now get the energy theme and ring and wand without having to waste gold keys, and that is to me is one of the biggest changes, because I actually use the ring theme on all my characters. So as you can see, it gives 8 energy. The Afro ring gives 6, and if you don't have pack wands, of course, you know that's going to be completely different. But it's still the wand that Afro drops gives you 10 energy, so it's like 4 energy difference. But for a free-to-play player and you don't want to spend money on the game, like these 3 pieces 100% are worth farming for no matter what, because of the fact of energy gear and being able to tend to your farming needs, of course. Or maybe you want to do pet making. I feel like these are things that you should 100% go for. And it also drops energy jewels, which I feel like are kind of like not talked about as much. Of course, if you open packs, you're gonna have energy jewels, but for a free-to-play player, like you can farm like I think 1, 2, and 3 energy jewels from Afro. I could be wrong on that, but I know for sure you can get 1 and 2. I don't know about the 3. 4 or 5, I don't really think you can get that from there, but I'm pretty sure about the 1 and 2. And also, if you're a life, you can now get Sacred Charge pretty easy. The reason being is instead of wasting gold keys, you can now waste your stone keys. And stone keys, I'm pretty sure, are farmable compared to gold keys. So that to me is a really big change. So if you're just a person that really wants to farm for that spell, you can kind of just keep going for it and gun for Sacred Charge if you're just a collector. Which personally, I think I'm going to do because I still don't have Sacred Charge on my life because I only maxed it out quite recently. So definitely something up my alley, of course. But that's overall all the changes to the key bosses. Hope you guys enjoyed just like kind of like a sit down talk video and explaining all the gold key changes. If there's any more changes that I hear about or someone tells me about in the comments, I will definitely make a separate video regarding that. But so far, these are all the changes to the gold key bosses. I don't know if any stone key bosses were reverted to wooden. I don't think so, but I'll look into it and double check on Test Realm and see if anything was changed. But yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that type of stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.